Captain Elias Ward sat alone in the cockpit of his small ship, watching the endless stretch of stars outside the glass. The soft hum of the engine was the only sound around him. He had been traveling for weeks in this distant part of the galaxy, far away from familiar colonies, searching for signs of habitable worlds or lost signals that the main fleet ignored. His duty was simple: explore, record, survive. Yet loneliness weighed on him more than the cold of space. The silence broke when a sharp alarm blinked across his console, a distress signal. Elias leaned forward, narrowing his eyes at the flickering lines of code. It was old, broken, and repeating in a weak cycle, almost fading. But there was something strange about it. The language was not human. His system worked to translate, but even without the full words, he felt the urgency behind the call. Someone out there was asking for help. He set the coordinates, guiding his ship toward a dying planet in the sector. From above, the world looked wounded. Vast scars of blackened ground, shattered cities, and skies filled with drifting smoke. It was clear that whatever had lived here had suffered a great disaster. As he descended through the clouds, the distress signal grew stronger, pulling him to the surface. Elias landed near the ruins of what looked like a city center. The structures were tall but broken, half swallowed by fire and age. His boots crunched over cracked stone as he stepped out, scanning the shadows with his rifle ready. The air smelled of dust and burned metal. He did not expect to find anyone alive. Still, the signal came from close by, echoing softly through his receiver. He turned a corner and froze. There, sitting against a collapsed wall, was a figure. She looked fragile, her body thin and trembling, her skin a pale shade with faint silver lines running across it, glowing softly like veins of light. Her hair fell long and tangled, her face young and beautiful yet marked by exhaustion. She lifted her head slowly, and her eyes, large, bright, and filled with strange emotion, met his. Her lips moved, and his translator activated. The words that came through the device startled him. "Please, human, do it again. Love me again," the alien pleaded. Elias stood still, confused. The rifle in his hands felt heavier. He did not know what she meant, nor why she spoke with such aching sadness, as if she had been waiting not just for help but for something deeper. He stepped closer, lowering his weapon, unsure if this was a trap or a genuine cry. "You know me?" he asked carefully. Her chest rose with a weak breath. "Not you, but one like you. Long ago, human hands saved us. Human hearts cared. We remember." Her words were broken, but her eyes never left him, shining with hope and desperation. Elias crouched down, taking out a medical pack from his belt. She looked injured, with burns on her arm and dust covering her wounds. He began cleaning them, and she flinched at his touch but did not pull away. Instead, she stared at him as though every small movement confirmed her belief that he was the one she had been waiting for. As he worked, he tried to understand. "Your people met humans before?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. Centuries ago, before the machines came. They promised us kindness. They gave us light. Then they were gone. We thought never again, but now you are here. Please, human, love me again." The translator carried her words with a softness that tugged at Elias's chest. He understood now that her plea was not about romance or desire. It was about survival, about trust, about needing humanity's compassion once more. He looked around, at the ruins, the silence of a broken world, and realized she might be the last of her kind here. The signal he had followed had been hers, a call sent into the void, hoping someone would answer. Against all odds, he had been the one to hear it. Elias finished bandaging her arm and offered her water. She drank carefully, her hands shaking as though unused to kindness. For a long moment they sat together in the quiet ruins, the stars hidden, above by the smoke-filled sky. His mind turned over her words again and again. Love me again. What had humanity done for her people in the past? What kind of bond had been formed long before his time? And why did fate bring him here now, alone at this moment, to hear those same words once more? As the night grew darker, Elias helped her to her feet. She leaned on him for support, fragile yet unbroken. Her eyes carried the weight of history, but also a spark of new hope. Elias did not know what path awaited them, or if he was ready to carry the burden she placed on his shoulders. But as they walked back toward his ship, her voice repeated softly in his ears, lingering like an echo through his heart. "Please, human, do it again. Love me again." And though he did not yet fully understand, Elias knew he could not turn away. Elias guided the fragile alien through the dark ruins, keeping his arm steady under hers so she would not fall. Each step was slow, but she moved with quiet determination, as though the weight of her history pressed against her body. The wind swept through the broken city, carrying dust and the faint crackle of ruined machines somewhere in the distance. Elias remained alert, his hand near his rifle, though he sensed no threat for now. Inside his ship, the air was cleaner, and the warmth of the systems hummed gently. The alien lowered herself into the seat he offered, breathing with relief as though the small act of shelter was already a gift she had long forgotten. Elias studied her carefully. Her skin's silver lines pulsed faintly, glowing softer now that she was no longer in pain. Her eyes followed every movement he made, as if she feared he might vanish like a dream if she blinked too long. "My name is Elias Ward," he said finally, wanting to bridge the silence. "What should I call you?" The translator buzzed for a moment before her soft voice came through. "Serenia," she answered. Her tone carried a quiet strength, though exhaustion still weighed heavily. Elias nodded. "Serenia, can you tell me what happened here?" She closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. When she opened them, sorrow filled her gaze. "Machines," she whispered. "They came like a tide. They eat the land, the sky, the water. They do not stop. We fought. We fell. Cities turned to ash. My people scattered. Many gone. Some hiding, some running. I stayed to send the call." Her words struck Elias with a cold truth. He had seen many kinds of wars in human history, but what she described sounded like more than battle. It was destruction without reason. He leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. "And the humans you spoke of before? The ones who came long ago?" Serenia's expression softened, touched by memory. "They came from the stars like you, long before the machines. They gave us knowledge, showed us how to grow, how to heal. They told us we were not alone. We believed them. We loved them. And they loved us. But then they left. We waited. Generations. And now you return." Her eyes locked on him, full of fragile hope. Elias shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. He was just one man, not a savior of worlds. He had not come here to reignite ancient promises. And yet, listening to her voice, he could not ignore the weight behind her plea. "Serenia," he said quietly, "I don't know what my people did for yours before, but I am not sure I can bring back what was lost." She leaned forward, her thin hands trembling as they gripped his. "You do not see. It is not about power. It is about heart. They gave us hope. They showed us kindness. Please, do it again. Love us again. Even if you are only one, you are enough to remind us." Elias felt her touch, warm and desperate. The translator carried her words in a fragile tone, but the meaning behind them was clear. He pulled back, slowly taking a breath. He had sworn to explore, not to interfere. Yet here was a living being asking not for weapons, not for conquest, but for the simple act of compassion. He stood and moved to the console, checking his ship's sensors. The scan confirmed faint energy signatures scattered across the planet. Hidden shelters, faint life signs buried beneath ruins. She was not the last. Others were still out there, clinging to survival. His heart grew heavier. If he turned away now, what would happen to them? Serenia watched him silently, her silver-lined skin faintly glowing in the ship's dim light. Finally, Elias turned back to her. "There are others like you still alive," he said. "If I can reach them, if I can keep them safe, would that mean something to your people?" Her eyes widened, tears brimming at the edges. She nodded, almost unable to speak. "Yes," she whispered. "If they see you, they will remember. They will believe again." Elias exhaled slowly. His mission had just changed. He no longer thought of this as exploration, but as responsibility. Maybe fate had placed him here not by accident, but by design. "Rest," he told her. "Tomorrow, we'll go looking for them." She leaned back, closing her eyes, relief softening her features for the first time since he found her. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, Elias sat quietly at the console, staring out at the broken horizon. He replayed her words in his mind. "Please, human. Love me again." They echoed not as a simple plea from one alien, but as a cry from a people, on the edge of extinction. Through the dark sky, faint streaks of light burned across the clouds, remnants of machines still circling above. Elias tightened his grip on the armrest. He did not know how much fight remained in him, but he knew one thing with certainty. He could not ignore them. The night passed slowly, filled with distant echoes of the dying world outside. When dawn came, a pale light spilled into the ship. Serenia stirred awake, her eyes opening with renewed determination. She looked at Elias, as if he were the last star in a collapsing sky. For the first time, Elias allowed himself to meet her gaze without looking away. Perhaps he could not bring back the past, but he could give them a chance at tomorrow. And in that silent exchange, an unspoken promise began to form. The morning air outside was heavy with smoke when Elias stepped out of his ship. The ruins stretched in every direction, broken towers leaning like bones of a long-dead giant. Serenia followed him slowly, her steps still weak but steadier than before. She wore a simple cloth Elias had found in the ship, covering her shoulders from the cold. Her silver-lined skin caught faint light from the rising sun, making her seem both fragile and unearthly. Elias carried his scanner, sweeping the area for the life signs he had detected the night before. The readings flickered on the small screen, weak, distant but present. Survivors were scattered across the ruins. Some were deeper underground, some hidden in shattered buildings. He glanced at Serenia. "There are people out there. We'll find them." Her lips trembled into a faint smile. "They will not believe at first," she said softly. "They will fear. But if they see you, maybe they will remember." They moved cautiously through the streets. Ash crumbled beneath their boots, and strange black vines twisted around the broken walls, remnants of the machine's damage. The silence was unsettling, broken only by distant metallic clicks. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, every muscle ready. Serenia stayed close, her eyes scanning shadows with quiet dread. Hours passed as they followed the signal deeper into the city. At last, Elias spotted movement, shapes huddled inside a broken structure, peering out with glowing eyes like Serenia's. He raised a hand, signaling peace, but the moment they saw him, sharp cries filled the air. Several figures rushed forward, their bodies thin but fierce, holding improvised weapons made from scraps. Serenia stepped ahead quickly. "Wait," she cried in her own tongue, the translator repeating her words in Elias's ear. "Do not attack, he is human." The survivors froze, stunned by her declaration. Murmurs rippled among them. A tall figure stepped forward, his face scarred, his silver lines dim with exhaustion. He looked at Elias with suspicion and anger. "Human," he spat. "There are no more humans. They left us to die." Elias felt the weight of his glare but stood firm. "I came because I heard your call," he said. His voice carried steady through the translator. "I am here now, the alien leader's eyes narrowed. "One man cannot save us. You are nothing against the swarm." Serenia moved closer to him, her voice trembling but strong. "Listen to me, Corin. I sent the call." He answered. "Long ago, humans gave us hope. They gave us light. This one can Do it again. Please believe, the survivors muttered, divided between doubt and fragile hope. Elias could see the despair in their faces, the hunger, the fear. He had seen it before in human wars, when people no longer believed in tomorrow. He took a step forward, lowering his weapon so they could see his hands. I don't have all the answers, Elias admitted. I am not a hero, but I can fight. I can protect. If you stand with me, we can push back. If you give up now, then the machines win without another shot fired. Corin studied him in silence. The survivors behind him shifted uneasily, torn, between mistrust and the strange pull of Elias's words. Finally, Corin lowered his makeshift weapon. If you speak truth, he said slowly, then prove it. The swarm hunts us every night. If you can stand with us, maybe we will listen. Elias nodded. It was not acceptance, but it was a start. They moved together to a hidden shelter beneath the ruins. There, more survivors waited, dozens of them, weary and afraid. Children huddled, close to their parents, their silver-lined skin faint and dim. When they saw Elias, whispers spread quickly. Some hid their faces, others stared in awe. Serenia stayed by his side, her presence giving them courage. He is human, she told them again and again. The promise is not broken. Elias looked at them all, feeling the weight of their eyes on him. He had not asked for this role, yet here he was, their only connection to a past where hope still lived. That night, as shadows deepened and the distant whirring of machines grew closer, he prepared his rifle and checked his ship's equipment. The survivors gathered in silence, waiting to see if he truly was different from the humans they remembered. When the swarm came, it began with a low hum through the streets. Dozens of small insect-like machines crawled over the rubble, their red sensors glowing in the dark. The survivors panicked, clutching their children, but Elias stepped forward. His rifle flashed with precise bursts, cutting down the first wave. The aliens gasped at the sight of human firepower striking with such accuracy. Corin and his fighters joined in with their crude weapons, emboldened by Elias's lead. Serenia shouted words of courage, her voice echoing in the underground hall. Together they fought, and for the first time in many nights, the swarm retreated. The ruins fell silent again, save for the sound of heavy breathing and stunned disbelief. Elias lowered his weapon, scanning the group. None of the survivors had been lost. Slowly, their fearful eyes turned into something new, recognition. Corin approached, breathing hard, his scarred face softened just slightly. Perhaps, he admitted, the promise was not a lie. Serenia's eyes filled with quiet triumph as she looked at Elias. She whispered so only he could hear. Please, human. Do it again. Love us again. And Elias, though still uncertain of what lay ahead, felt the first stirrings of resolve. He had shown them a spark. Now he had to keep it burning. The night after the battle, the survivors whispered among themselves. Some spoke of fear, some of hope, but all of them could not ignore what they had seen. A single human had stood against the machines and forced them back. For generations they had believed humans were gone forever, their promise broken. Now one walked among them again. Elias sat near the fire in the underground shelter, cleaning his rifle. The children stared at him from behind the safety of their parents, their silver-lined, eyes wide with curiosity. Serenia sat close by, her face lit by the warm glow. She had not stopped watching him since the fight, her expression full of something Elias could not quite name. Faith, perhaps, or gratitude deeper than words. You fought like the humans of old, Corin finally said, stepping forward. His voice was rough but less sharp than before. But one battle is not victory. The swarm will return, and they will return stronger. Elias nodded. I know. Machines don't give up. They keep coming until everything is gone. He looked at the survivors, their tired faces, their weak bodies. You can't just hide anymore. If you keep running, they'll find you. You have to fight back. A murmur of fear spread through the crowd. The survivors had lived so long in despair that the thought of open resistance seemed impossible. Corin shook his head. "We are not soldiers. We are broken. Our weapons are scraps. How can we fight what even our armies could not defeat?" Elias set down his rifle and stood. His voice carried steady through the room. "Because you're not alone anymore. You don't need to fight like soldiers. You just need to believe that you can survive. I'll fight with you. I'll teach you. Together we can stand." His words hung heavy in the silence. Serenia rose beside him, her silver lines glowing faintly in the dim light. "Listen to him," she urged. "We waited generations for humans to return. Now one stands here. Will you ignore the promise? Or will you let it live again?" Slowly, some heads lifted. A spark flickered in their weary eyes. Corin looked at Elias long and hard, then gave a small nod. "Very well, human. Show us how." The days that followed were hard and restless. Elias taught them how to build defenses from the ruins, how to use traps and signals to watch the streets, how to fight together instead of scattering in panic. He showed them how to aim with steady hands, how to move as one. Their weapons were weak, but strategy and unity gave them strength. The survivors trained with trembling limbs, but each day they grew a little stronger. Children carried messages, elders repaired broken tools, and fighters drilled under Elias's sharp eyes. Serenia moved among them with quiet words of encouragement, reminding them of the promise their ancestors once heard. Her belief in Elias gave the others courage to believe too, but the swarm was not blind. Their red sensors watched from the ruins, and soon their hum filled the air again. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the ground trembled. Dozens of machines poured into the streets, larger and more armored than before. The survivors froze at the sound, terror threatening to undo all they had built. Elias climbed the broken wall, his rifle ready. "Hold your ground," he shouted. "Don't break, remember what I taught you." The first wave struck like a storm. Sharp metal legs clattered across the stone, red lights cutting through the dark. The survivors fired crude energy bolts, while Elias's rifle cracked with deadly precision. Explosions lit the night as machines fell, but more replaced them, crawling over the ruins like a flood. Elias leapt from the wall, landing among them with fearless focus. His weapon roared, his movements sharp and deliberate. Every shot protected those behind him. Corin and his fighters rallied, pushing back with fierce cries. For the first time they did not run. They stood. Serenia's voice rose above the chaos, calling out to her people, urging them not to falter. Her eyes never left Elias, her faith in him shining brighter than the fire around them. He fought not only with his weapon, but with the weight of her plea echoing in his heart. "Please, human, do it again. Love us again." The battle raged for what felt like endless hours, until finally the machines began to retreat. Broken metal littered the streets, glowing sparks fading into the night. The survivors stood in stunned silence, their chests heaving, their weapons shaking in tired hands. For the first time in years, they had driven the swarm back. Elias wiped dust from his face, lowering his rifle. He looked around at them, these fragile, desperate people who had believed themselves finished, and he saw something new in their eyes. Not fear, not despair, but the faintest fire of courage. Corin walked to him, his scarred face marked with disbelief. "You made us fight," he said. His voice carried no anger now, only a strange respect. Perhaps the promise is real after all." Serenia stepped closer, her eyes soft, her voice a whisper meant for Elias alone. "You see? They believe. You gave them what they had lost." Elias met her gaze, the memory of her first words still lingering. He had not chosen this path, yet here he was, carrying the burden of hope for an entire people. He felt the weight pressing on him, but also the strength that came with it. The ruins were quiet once more, but Elias knew this was only the beginning. The machines would return. They would grow stronger. And if he wanted to keep the promise alive, he would have to lead these people into a war they had long abandoned. For now, though, he let them celebrate their small victory. Around the firelight, weary voices began to sing faint songs of survival. Sirenia watched him with eyes full of trust, and Elias, though tired to his bones, allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this fight was worth everything. The days after the battle felt different for the survivors. For the first time in years, they did not wake only with fear in their hearts. There was still hunger, still broken walls around them, still the distant hum of machines in the night. But there was also something new. It was a quiet strength, the first spark of trust that they could stand together and fight. Elias walked among them each morning, checking defenses and giving orders. The survivors, once doubtful of him, now listened closely. Even the children followed him with wide eyes, whispering stories about the human who came from the stars. Though he had not asked for it, they looked at him as if he carried all their hopes on his shoulders. Sirenia moved with him often, translating where words faltered, reminding her people of the ancient promise. Her voice was gentle, but her belief was fierce, and it gave the others courage to keep going. Elias found himself watching her sometimes, the silver lines on her skin glowing brighter whenever she spoke with conviction. He had saved her life, but she had become the bridge between him and the rest of her people. Corin, once harsh and mistrusting, began to stand beside Elias during drills. He corrected fighters with his deep voice, showing them where their stances were weak. He had fought many battles, lost too many, but now he seemed to find new purpose in training the younger ones. "Your way is strange, human," he admitted one evening, "but it works. You make us move as one, not as scattered prey." Elias nodded. One person alone falls quickly, but together, even weak fighters can defeat stronger enemies. The survivors listened. They built walls from rubble, laid traps in the streets, and learned to fight in pairs and groups. It was slow, clumsy at first, but each day they grew better. They no longer looked like frightened shadows hiding in ruins. They were beginning to look like a people who could rise again. Yet the danger around them never lessened. The swarm still moved in the distance, their red sensors glowing in the night like unblinking eyes. Sometimes Elias stood watch at the broken towers, rifle in hand, listening to the faint hum echoing across the dead city. He knew they were being observed. The machines would come again, stronger and in greater numbers. He had bought time, nothing more. One evening, as he studied the scanner in his ship, Sirenia entered quietly. She stood close, her silver-lined skin reflecting the dim light of the console. "You are changing them," she said softly. "I can see it in their eyes. They believe again." Elias leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "Belief is good, but belief alone won't stop the machines. They need more than me. They need to know how to fight even when I'm not there." She tilted her head, studying him. "You speak as if you are temporary. Do you plan to leave?" The question struck him harder than he expected. He had not thought so far ahead. His mission had never included staying behind to lead another world's war. Yet as he looked at her, at the way her eyes shone with both hope and fear, he knew leaving was no simple choice. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "But right now I can't walk away. Not when you're all still alive." Sirenia smiled, faintly, and for a moment her tired face seemed lighter. "That is enough," she whispered. The next day, Elias decided to push further. It was not enough to defend the ruins. They had to test themselves outside the safety of walls. He led a small group, including Corin and Sirenia, into the outer streets where machines often scouted. They moved carefully, silent through the broken alleys. Elias showed them how to set ambushes, how to draw enemies into traps, how to strike quickly and vanish again. When the first patrol of machines appeared, clicking and humming as they crawled over the rubble, Elias gave the signal. The survivors struck with sudden force, collapsing walls onto the machines and firing from hidden positions. Elias's rifle cracked in sharp bursts, cutting down stragglers. In minutes, the machines were gone, their wreckage scattered across the street. The survivors stared at the broken metal, their breaths quick with excitement. For the first time, they had gone out and returned victorious. Elias could see the pride in their faces. They were no longer just hiding, no longer just surviving. They were learning to fight back. That night, the survivors gathered around the fire in their shelter. Instead of whispers of fear, they spoke of the ambush with eager voices. Children repeated the story with wide eyes, and the fighters stood, taller, their shoulders no longer slumped under despair. Serenia sat beside Elias, her eyes shining as she listened to her people. "You gave them more than survival," she said softly, leaning close so only he could hear. "You gave them tomorrow." Elias stared into the flames, the crackle of fire reminding him of battles long past. He thought of the countless stars above, of his own people far away, unaware of the world he had found. He had come as an explorer, expecting only data and silence. Instead, he had been given trust, need, and a promise he had never known existed. Glanced at Serenia, her silver lines glowing like gentle rivers across her skin. Her plea still echoed in his heart, shaping his every choice. "Please, human, do it again. Love me again." He understood more clearly now. It was not just her words, not just her desire. It was the voice of her people, of an entire world begging for compassion and courage. As the firelight flickered across their faces, Elias realized something he had not before. He was no longer just a visitor on this dying planet. He was becoming part of it, and whether he liked it or not, the fight ahead would not just be theirs, it would be his too. The ruins no longer felt as silent as before. Each day brought the sound of movement, not only from the machines that prowled, but also from the survivors who now trained, rebuilt, and planned. The shelter that had once been filled with despair now carried the noise of life. Children laughing softly, fighters sharpening weapons, and voices that no longer trembled when they spoke of the future. Elias had changed them, but he knew the machines had noticed as well. The small victories could not remain hidden forever. The swarm was vast and the enemy never forgot. He stood one evening on the highest tower that still remained, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The scanner at his side picked up heavier signals, now not just scattered scouts but large clusters gathering far away. The swarm was preparing. Serenia climbed the steps behind him, her breath calm despite the steep climb. She stopped beside him, her silver-lined skin glowing faintly in the pale light. "You feel it too," she said. Elias gave a small nod. "They're watching. They're planning. Every time we win, they grow more aware of us. The next time they come, it won't be scouts, it'll be war." Serenia looked out at the ruins with quiet sadness. "My people have lived so long in fear that many cannot imagine war anymore. But you make them believe it is possible." "I can't do it alone," Elias answered firmly. "If they only depend on me, they'll fall the moment I'm gone. They need to learn to fight for themselves, to lead themselves." Her eyes met his. "You are not gone yet, and they need you now." The next days were filled with preparation. Elias pushed the survivors harder, teaching them new tactics, showing them how to strike at the machine's weak points and how to use the wreckage left behind as tools and weapons. The children scavenged parts from broken drones, while elders learned to craft defenses from twisted metal. Slowly, the survivors began to feel like an army, not a scattered people. Corin grew into Elias's second hand, drilling the fighters with sharp commands. His scarred face often carried doubt, but his actions showed loyalty. "We were prey," he told the others one night, "but the human makes us hunters again. Stand beside him, and we will not fall." The more Elias taught, the more they followed, but he felt the pressure growing heavier each day. The promise Serenia had spoken of was no longer just a memory. It was alive again, breathing in every word and every glance from her people. He carried it now, and it weighed more than any weapon he had ever held. The attack came sooner than expected. At dusk, the earth trembled, and the air filled with the metallic hum of countless machines. Red lights burned in the distance, spreading like a tide across the horizon. The survivors rushed to their positions, fear flashing in their eyes, but this time they did not run. They stood behind their walls, their traps, their weapons, their human leader. Elias moved quickly through the lines, checking defenses, giving short commands. He could feel their fear, but he also saw something else. Determination. Sirenia stood among the civilians, her voice rising with steady strength. Do not falter, do not turn away, the promise has returned. Stand with him and you will stand with yourselves. The first wave struck with brutal force. Heavy machines crawled over the ruins, spitting fire and tearing at walls. Smaller drones swarmed from the skies, their wings buzzing like angry insects. The survivors fired from their positions, crude weapons flashing while Elias's rifle cracked again and again. Explosions shook the streets, filling the air with smoke and sparks. Elias fought at the front, his movements sharp, his aim steady. He shouted commands, guiding the survivors to shift their fire, to push where the machines were weakest. Traps detonated beneath the swarm, collapsing rubble onto their steel bodies. The survivors roared with a strength Elias had never heard from them before. But the swarm was vast. For every machine that fell, 2 more seemed to appear. The battle, stretched into hours, and exhaustion gnawed at the survivors' strength. Elias's rifle grew hot in his hands. His muscles burned, but he kept moving, kept fighting, because if he stopped, so would they. Through the smoke, he saw Sirenia, her voice rising above the chaos. She shouted words of courage, her silver lines, glowing brighter as if her very spirit was aflame. Her people turned to her voice and fought harder, their fear swallowed by the fire she carried. Elias felt it too, her plea echoing within him. Please, human, do it again. Love us again. At last, after endless waves, the machines began to retreat. Their red lights faded into the night, their broken parts littering the streets. The survivors stood trembling, their weapons heavy, but they were still alive. For the first time, they had faced the swarm head-on and endured. When silence finally returned, cheers broke out among them. Some wept, some shouted, and others simply fell to their knees in relief. Elias lowered his rifle, his chest heaving, sweat running down his face. He looked at the survivors and saw not prey, not broken people, but fighters. Corin approached, his scarred face streaked with ash but his eyes shining. You made us into more than survivors, he said. You made us warriors again. Sirenia stepped closer, her eyes fixed on Elias, glowing with pride and something deeper. You gave them what no machine could take, she whispered. You gave them back their hearts. Elias wanted to deny it, to say it was their own strength, not his. But deep inside, he knew her words carried truth. He had sparked something they thought lost forever. And though the swarm would come again, perhaps stronger than ever, he also knew this. The survivors were ready to resist. That night, as the fires burned across the ruins, Elias stood among them, no longer just a visitor from another world. He was their leader now, their fighter, their proof that humanity's promise had not been forgotten. The night was colder than usual, the sky black and heavy with smoke. Elias stood on the edge of the ruined city, surveying the horizon. In the distance, the swarm gathered in a massive formation, larger than anything he had faced before. Machines were no longer scattered. They had a central hive, a command structure directing every movement. This was the moment that would decide the fate of Sirenia's people. Sirenia approached him quietly, her silver-lined skin faintly glowing under the dim starlight. She placed a hand on his arm. They are ready, she said softly. All of them. The survivors. They believe in you. Elias nodded. He had trained them for weeks, teaching them how to fight, how to trust one another, how to see hope even in the ruins. They were far from perfect, but they were no longer terrified shadows. They were warriors now, and he had to lead them. The survivors gathered behind him, weapons ready, faces set with determination. Corin stood at their side, his scarred face serious. We fight together, he said, his voice carrying over the murmurs. We do not run, we do not falter. The human stands with us, and so we stand with him. Elias adjusted his rifle and checked the traps they had set. Every ruin, every street, every alley had been prepared as a defensive line. They had learned to work as one, to strike in unison. He could feel their nerves, but he also felt the fire in their hearts. They were ready to reclaim their world. The swarm advanced like a wave, metal bodies clattering and red lights flashing. The ground trembled beneath their movements. Elias gave the signal and the survivors struck. Crude weapons and traps slowed the machines, while Elias's rifle and precise shots cut down the leaders. Every survivor moved with purpose, striking and retreating as he had taught. The battle raged through the ruins. Sparks flew, metal twisted, and smoke filled the air. The swarm was relentless, but the survivors held their ground. Corian led charges through narrow alleys, striking at weak points, while children carried messages and supplies to those in danger. Serenia moved among them, calling encouragement and coordinating their actions, her voice rising above the chaos. Elias felt a surge of determination. This was what her plea had meant. Not just her words, but the trust of her people. Please, human, I'd do it again. Love us again. It was not about saving her alone. It was about saving them all, about giving them hope again. He fought with precision, with courage, with the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The central hive of machines loomed ahead, larger and more terrifying than anything he had imagined. Red sensors scanned the ruins, searching for movement. Elias knew this was the heart of the swarm, the source of their power. To destroy it would be to free the world from endless fear. He signaled to the survivors. "We take the hive," he shouted. "Stick together, follow my lead, and do not falter." They advanced cautiously, using traps to disable smaller machines. The survivors moved like one, blocking each other's blind spots, covering one another, firing with determination. Elias's shots were precise, cutting through metal, while Corin and his fighters struck with improvised weapons and courage. Serenia stayed near the center, her voice guiding the group, her presence a light among the darkness. Finally, they reached the hive. It was massive, black and twisted, pulsing with energy. Elias fired at the main core while the survivors held off the attacking machines. Sparks flew, explosions shook the ground, and the hive shuddered under their combined assault. Serenia called out, directing the survivors to target weak points. Together, they pushed forward. Elias took careful aim, and with one final burst, the hive erupted in fire and metal, collapsing in on itself. The swarm faltered, disoriented, and finally scattered. The surviving machines fled into the darkness, leaving the ruins silent at last. The survivors stared in disbelief. They had done it. They had faced the swarm's greatest power and emerged victorious. Tears ran down faces once hardened by fear, and whispers of relief filled the air. Corin approached Elias, his face streaked with ash and sweat. You kept the promise," he said quietly. "You truly did." Serenia moved beside Elias, her eyes shining with gratitude. She placed a hand on his arm and whispered softly, "You gave them hope. You gave them life. You did it again." Elias looked around at the survivors, at the broken city that had been their prison and now their battlefield. He realized that her plea had never been just about her. It was about her people, about trust, about showing them that humanity's kindness, courage, and determination were still alive in the stars. He lowered his rifle, exhausted but unbroken. The survivors gathered around, some hugging each other, some kneeling in relief, and others simply staring at the horizon, breathing in the quiet for the first time in years. Serenia's voice rose once more, carrying across the ruins. "The promise is alive. Humanity's light is not gone. We stand again." Elias allowed himself a small smile. He had not come to this world to be a hero, yet here he was, standing with a people he had never known, leading them through fear into victory. They had believed in him, and through them he had rediscovered something he had almost forgotten: the power of hope, the strength of trust, and the meaning of the promise carried through generations. The ruins were scarred, but the people were alive. The machines were defeated for now, and the survivors could rebuild. Elias knew this was only the beginning of their journey, but he also knew they were no longer helpless. They had learned to fight, to trust, and to hope again. He looked at Sirenia, and in her eyes he saw the unspoken words he had heard since the beginning. Please, human, love us again. And this time, Elias understood completely. He had done it. He had kept the promise, and he would continue to do so, for as long as they needed him. The stars above seemed brighter now, distant suns shining over a world that had been given a second chance. And in that quiet, victorious night, Elias felt a deep, unshakable truth. Humanity's heart could reach across the galaxy, and its love, courage, and hope could live again, even in the darkest of places.